So what the hell is a sweet spot ride? Hey everyone, it's Graham Street. You're joining me here on my YouTube channel. We're on cyclecore.com, and today I'm going to be answering some questions concerning a really important topic as we hit spring and in season for a lot of us riders. And that's the use of sweet spot rides, or what's called tempo rides, or what I like to call the seam ride. You can call it, I guess, whatever you want, the bunny ride if you want, but bottom line is that basically what a sweet spot ride represents in empirical terms is being able to ride for longer periods of time at an effort level. If you want to measure that via heart rate, power, and I guess pace, but overall heart rate or power, just below your functional threshold power, typically about 1 to 3% below that range creates your zone 3 plus or sweet spot zone. It's a very thin line of energy out from you that you can sustain, at least on paper, indefinitely with the right fueling strategy. Now, that's of course easier said than done for sure. And one of the end games, for my programs at least, is to seam together the attributes of high intensity training, muscular endurance training, neuromuscular facilitation, core and functional training, recovery, endurance training, technique training, to seam those together, quite literally to tie those little individual parts together over time to create the greater opportunity for a zone 3 successful ride. A lot of you may think, and this is ironic to me, that if you just go out and ride kinda hard all the time, then you're always accomplishing zone 3 plus. You're always going to be doing tempo rides. And in a matter of fact, a lot of riders do that. I used to do that decades ago. Ride kind of hard all the time, meaning that you never really had one day where you're trying to peel your face off, not one day where you're trying to be super easy, just that kind of consistent duck in water just below super hard all the time. This, ironically, is a self-defeating way to ride, because what we're not doing is we're not working on our highs and we're not addressing our lows. So kind of like gambling or betting, you want to address both of those bookends. You want to cover your bets, so to speak, so you have a greater opportunity to ride that higher level flat line for much longer. And we talked about this before. It bears repeating. One of the things that really separates out a higher level cyclist in general, especially a professional level cyclist, is they can ride not just longer levels of their zone 3 plus or their sweet spot, but they can do that over a variety of terrains: uphills, downhills, crosswinds, group rides, races. And they, of course, can do that at a higher output than they have been before. A lot of professional riders will have a zone 3 or zone 3 plus output that they can maintain hour after hour that will be 20% higher than most of our FTP or threshold numbers. So who has the advantage there? The person with the higher zone 3 plus or the person with a short spurt zone 4, zone 5 level effort ability? The person with the zone 3 plus is a trump card. It is a way to just wear someone else out ongoing. Or more importantly, if you're a solo rider or an endurance rider, a way to keep you moving forward at a consistent, strong pace ongoing. So let's talk real quick about chunk rides. Now this is a big component of my Cyclo 90 base, Cyclo 90 Masters, and Cyclo 90 in season. It's always been a component. What we mean by chunk riding in relation to tempo is the accumulation of effort over the course of a ride. I think a lot of people, like, for example, ride number 6 from my master's program is a 2.5 hour sweet spot ride. A lot of people, if they're not reading the directions in the program, and you know who you are if you're not reading my directions, assume that they have to go out and try to ride 2.5 hours all at zone 3 plus from beginning to end. You can try to do that. It's probably not going to happen, at least not empirically. What we're looking to do is accumulate a set amount of time. So if I have a 2.5 hour ride, I may look to accumulate an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of accumulated zone 3 plus level efforts. And when I say accumulate, it means that it could happen at 5-minute spurts, 10-minute spurts, or what we call chunks, 20-minute chunks, 30-minute chunks. It depends on your terrain. I know for me here in Connecticut, I don't have really any roads or even trails that allow me to stay consistently like spot on like an indoor trainer at 280 watts for 20 minutes straight shot. It's not going to happen outside in the real world. It's just not. It's going to be more like this, okay? That's going to be for most of us as well. The only time you really get that opportunity is if you're on a pancake flat road with very little wind resistance or tarmac resistance, and or you have the opportunity to climb some kind of hill with very little nastiness conditions, if you will, that's about 5 to 8% and ongoing consistently for X amount of time. So those of you that live in the mountains, things like that, that's easier to perform that type of chunk level tempo riding than it is for someone like myself. I mean, the ride I just did yesterday, you can look at it for yourself on Strava. Just go look at the course. And it doesn't even show the whole picture of the wind resistance, the wind conditions. It was very windy yesterday. So that has to factor into my effort level. The real key here is to seam together all the things that we go over in the HIIT sessions, the muscular endurance, the rollovers, the standing drills, the seated drills. Why am I constantly teaching and reinforcing these at higher intensities? Well, it's simple. If I can get you to do them in shorter windows of time at higher intensity, eventually when I seam those together, I literally tie them together, what was once 3 or 4 minutes at a time is now accumulated at an hour at a time, 2 hours at a time, 5 hours at a time. Now what we're getting now is a rate of return for our investment, if you will. So these shorter high intensity spurts have a rhyme and reason to them other than just a hard workout. No, we are looking to accumulate small pockets of effort and ability that we can later begin to seam together. And obviously as you move to the base program, the masters, and definitely into the in-season, you'll see a lot more of these seam rides coming into play. So by the time we hit spring, early summer, if you're following the base protocol and finishing up the last couple weeks, the rides get a little bit longer. They seam together more complexity. They add in more zone 3, zone 4, zone 5 level efforts. And this is what's escalating your fitness and more importantly, your execution of riding outside in the real world. Quick misnomer about tempo riding. A lot of coaches will tend to say that tempo riding is all aerobic. There is no anaerobic, and this is a flat out lie. Pretty much all activity the human body does has some component of an anaerobic nature, with oxygen or without. So aerobic means that there's oxygen present to be utilized, and then there's the pure anaerobic. A lot of people want to believe that it's either one or the other. This is not how the human body works. Me just talking to you right now is both aerobic and anaerobic. Yes, it's just a matter of how much aerobic versus anaerobic. But to say that tempo riding just below your threshold has no anaerobic component is a lie. And one of the reasons why I know that is simple. If I took the average rider that's untrained and unconditioned and measured their FTP heart rate and brought them out there and said, we're going to stay just below this heart rate for the next hour, I guarantee you 100 out of 100 of those riders are not going to be able to achieve that endeavor, that goal. You might say, well, it's below their threshold, it's below their ranging towards anaerobic capacity. Anaerobic capacity measured from the zones, zone 3, zone 4, in this particular case, zone 6 is what we call anaerobic intensity. When we say anaerobic intensity, what we really mean is where the quotient really shifts towards almost virtually all anaerobic. So think of like a 400-meter dasher, a 200-meter dasher. That's a pure anaerobic activity, or pretty close. It's like 98%. That doesn't mean there's not an aerobic component there. There is. But by and large, you could hold your breath and run a 100-meter dash. You can't hold your breath and run a 400-meter dash. You could try. I don't think it would be very fun. And you definitely can't hold your breath and run a mile. The reason I'm trying to express this is that it's the tempo riding and the pieces that lead to tempo riding using anaerobic training, using more VO2 max level training allows tempo to go up. So for those of you riders that just say, well, I'm just going to go out and ride kind of hard all the time, and that's going to increase my tempo level riding, that is going to end right quick. And the reason why is that to build tempo level riding, we have to cover the highs. We have to cover the anaerobic training in shorter pockets to make this level go up. Okay? And there's a difference here. This is why a lot of riders that use my programs when they go out for their group rides or for the races, they're astonished at how much easier these things are to do for longer periods of time. And it's simply because we've seamed together all these components. How often should you use tempo riding in your training? For me, it depends on the goal. I know for me with the base protocols, especially the Masters protocol, I only use it sparingly towards the end of the last 6 weeks. And I do that on purpose because there's so much more priority on strength, fundamentals, and foundational strength that we don't really insert a lot of tempo level riding until towards the end. Now, once we shift into Cycle 90 in-season, tempo riding and the use of tempo riding, the strategy of tempo riding begins to escalate. And let's say if you're on the endurance program from Cycle 90 in-season, I use tempo riding a lot. And what's more important, and I want to make this clear and then I'm going to finish, where I insert a tempo ride within a 7-day cycle or within a 7-day training protocol can totally change how that ride is facilitated. And this is what a lot of riders, they just miss it. They don't get it. If I have a progression of 3 days in a row of using high intensity one day, high intensity, like, a half an hour hit session with, your eyes popping out of your skull, and then a foundational ride or a zone, a low-level zone 3 technique ride the next day, and then I slam in there a 2.5 hour zone 3 plus or sweet spot ride on day 3, do you think that day 3 now becomes easier or harder to attain if I had nothing in front of it? It becomes much harder. And that's called the accumulation of fatigue. And the accumulation of fatigue is what we're looking for at specific times for all level riders to get an outcome. Remember, it's the stress of the training that causes you to get stronger, not the training itself. I'll repeat that so it's clear to everyone. It is the stress of the training that causes the reaction of your body to get stronger or weaker. It is not the training itself. So I can cram a whole bunch of stress into a very small pocket. That's why my hit sessions are the priority in my programs, is that I know that for most people, they don't have hours every day to try to accumulate stress, accumulate fatigue. So we have to kind of condense some of that to get more out of it. And by doing that, and then eventually elongating it further with zone 3 level rides, zone 2 level rides, or endurance level rides, now I've got a more balanced package, and I've accumulated stress in a variety of ways to execute for the defined goal. Well, friends, I hope this is helpful. I know it's been a while since my last show. Obviously, you can see I've been shut in here like a lumberjack, unable to get outside very often. Getting outside again today, thank goodness. It's been terrible here in the Northeast, but very strong right now. I'd like to lose a couple more pounds, but we'll talk about that in future videos. And until we ride again, remember the smile on your face. I'll talk to you soon.